Well, this is the old guy, and well, I'm professional derelicting here, and sitting in a gazebo. Sitting in a gazebo is a very dangerous thing, I found out. There's a floating urban myth that if you're sitting in a gazebo alone for any length of time, matrimony will be in the wind shortly. You will find a partner. And so I'm not looking, and I don't expect it. I mean, at my stage of the game, the goods are odd, and the odds aren't good, and the goods are odd. So, but anyway, it did happen. About 5 years ago, Mary McElhenney had a gift shop in town, and she had collectibles, mostly of Scotch-Irish extraction, because her mother ran the shop before her, and her mother came over and was Scotch-Irish also. So she was sitting having her lunch in the gazebo here, and she didn't know about the urban myth. And one afternoon, Mary McElhenney is in like her middle 40s. She's never been married. She's always been single. She wasn't the outgoing party type. She liked reading, crocheting, and making these little tiny porcelain painted houses, chairs, benches, tables. Very small. And she wasn't into going to movies, watching TV, or anything exciting. She was friendly and all, but she just didn't, when the market was open, she didn't put herself out there. And at her stage, the market is kind of at its low end, And well, she was sitting, finishing up her lunch, waiting to go back to work. And there's, right outside the gazebo, is a big walnut tree, wild walnut tree. And they have this green outer leather spiky coat on them. And if you want to eat the walnut, you have to break that open and peel it off. It's kind of thick. It's heavy with the walnut in there and this thing on. It's quite, when it hits the ground, you hear a thump. And the walnuts were coming down. And she strolled outside by the tree to look at some flowers that were planted by the bench. And by the gazebo was Ed McCarthy, who worked for the town Parks and Rec Committee. He was a maintenance man. He was mowing the lawn in the park, and he had his a weed whacker with him. He's weeding out on the back end of the gazebo there. So he sees her looking down at the flowers, and then bonk! A walnut comes down, bops Mary right off her head. She staggers around in a loop for a second and then flops down on the ground. He drops his weed whacker and runs over, and she's laying on the ground looking up, and she's not only seeing stars, she's seeing stars and hearts, all different little color hearts floating around with the stars. And in the middle of the stars appears Ed, looking down at her. He's about almost 50, and he's looking down at her, and she hears him mumble something. She couldn't quite hear. Finally, her hearing comes back, and she's in shock. And he goes, "Are you all right, ma'am? Do you think you can get up? Are you okay? You got bopped off the head with a walnut." And so he brings her up, and You know, she brushes her cell phone. She says, "Oh, thank you very much." He goes, "Do you want to sit down and rest?" She goes, "No, I think I'm okay. You want to go sit and rest while I have a coffee or some tea or something?" And she's like, she still sees the little hearts fading out, floating around his head with the stars. And she goes, "Yeah, we'll stop." So they walk out of the park, go over to the coffee shop, which is like 2 stores above from hers, and they sit down and have coffee and tea. And that's how it started. It started like once or twice a week, then it went to every other day, and they started talking about what they liked to do, and they had a lot of similarities. He made, among other things, he still was the guy who can make those sailing ships in a gallon bottle, and she always wondered how they did that. And you know, he told her, "Oh, you just cut off the bottom of the bottle, put the ship in, and then re-glue it, you know, and on the bottom, and then file it off, and it looks just like the regular smudgy bottom of the bottle." And she goes, "Oh, but he really did it the old-fashioned way, through the mouth of the bottle. He didn't." And she went over and he said, "I'm just kidding. I really do it the old-fashioned way." And she likes everything old-fashioned. So they went over to the shed in his office where he sits at night and he does this. And she would go over with him and read. And then she started doing her little mannequins, which he liked. And that was that. And 8 months later, they tied the knot. So watch out if you're sitting in a gazebo by yourself for any length of time, especially if you're single, and even if you're not looking, it could happen. Still River Radio.